Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Topic 2. We're going to take the ideas from last unit and apply them to places that might be more familiar to you, though I hope with an interesting and distinct twist. So this is about the United States and the United Kingdom, and we'll see how these play out here, particularly about how substates are, what it means to be an unincorporated region of another country, and to emphasize that idea of a cultural hearth I introduced a little bit last week in regards to the Iroquois, and we'll do again with this one here. But first, a quick review. So we're going to do a lot more about how FIFA is organized, how IOC is organized. That's the International Soccer Federation, the International Olympic Committee, in a couple of units here in Unit 1. We'll do a couple of topics. But just a review here, we'll start with Martinique, since we talked about it last time, and their relationship. So soccer is organized on a global scale by FIFA. And on a national level in France by the FFF, or the French Football Federation. So that's how the process would go for Martinique if it could continue up through the process into FIFA, but it cannot, right? It's an incorporated part of France. So incorporated just means it's a fully integrated part of France, the way Hawaii and Alaska are fully integrated parts of the United States. So instead, they have a regional federation, CONCACAF, and a sub-regional federation that's part of CONCACAF but focuses only on the Caribbean. And then they have a league called the Martinique Selection and League. So Martinique, it's Department of France, which plays soccer in regional competitions. And to emphasize this idea that having the trappings of nationhood can help give a country an identity, this flag that's shown here below the map, this flag's only from 2019, and it and an anthem were commissioned in 2019 specifically to play and be flown at sporting events and other cultural activities to which Martinique is invited, separate from France. So before that, they used either an old colonial flag, really interesting one that had four pit vipers on it. There's not a lot of flags with pit vipers on it, but it was a colonial flag that they rejected. They decided to reject, or the French flag. And so instead, they've got this. So that's them saying, "Look, we're a nation. We have a national team on some level in the Caribbean. In CONCACAF, we have a flag. We have an anthem." Taiwan is different because it is part of FIFA. Now, I emphasized in topic 1 that normally a country like France gives permission to a sub part of it, a sub-state, to be a member of sporting federations. In this case, Taiwan is considered distinct in sporting purposes from China, while officially China considers Taiwan a breakaway province, and that there's one China. That's not how the sporting world sees it. The sporting world sees it as two Chinas, right? So you have the Chinese Taipei Football Association, which is part of the sub-region of the East Asian Football Federation, a subunit of the Asian Soccer Federation, and then FIFA. So that's sort of how the relationship works, and it does often rely on parent country or colonial power relationships, but not always, as in the case of Chinese Taipei/Taiwan. So let's shift here to the United States. So the United States, as you probably know, 50 states and the District of Columbia. But there are other inhabited, unincorporated places. What unincorporated means is there's some limitations on the integration of that region with the parent company. So we emphasize overseas territories like Hawaii and Alaska being incorporated. That means they're full-fledged members. But in anything else, any other thing, they're called officially unincorporated. And so it sounds weird, like there's not even a government. But all it really refers to, its status politically in relation to the parent country. So Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and Wake Island are inhabited and unincorporated. So they do have a formal relationship with the United States. They are part of the United States, but they're not fully integrated. So there are some other regions that are uninhabited and unincorporated, like Johnston Island and Jarvis Island and Palmyra Atoll and some others. Wake Island is inhabited, but there's only about 50, sometimes 100 people on it. It's very small, like lots of birders and other climatologists and type folks are out there. So because they're not fully incorporated, fully integrated, they get rights in sports, not just to a regional level like Martinique with soccer and France. and the Caribbean, but full-fledged member states. So there is a Puerto Rico national team, a U.S. Virgin Islands national team, American Samoa, Guam, and Northern Mariana Islands. I think the Northern Mariana Islands only have one in track and field, but no other federations. But they do have a federation that they have their own flag, their own anthem that goes separate. So that means that in Puerto Rico, so Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. And as U.S. citizens, they have the right to compete for the U.S. national team in whatever sport we're talking about. In many sports, but not all sports, Puerto Rico also has a separate national team that Puerto Ricans can choose to participate on instead. So you get the right. You can't switch back and forth, but you can pick one and be on it. I believe all time there have been 25 Puerto Ricans, for example, who've won an Olympic medal. 15 of those have won medals competing for the United States, and 10 of them have won medals competing for Puerto Rico. So, they're all Puerto Ricans. They're all Americans, but sometimes they're on the Puerto Rican national team, and sometimes they're on the U.S. national team or the U.S. Olympic team. So same thing, Guam, Northern Marianas, the Virgin Islands. So you have a couple of pictures here. One, it leads to some very interesting situations where then Puerto Rico can play the United States in international competition. And even though they're part of the United States and there's an affinity and a fondness, there's also a rivalry and a feeling that they're second-class citizens, in part because the way the unincorporated structure is set up, which limits the benefits of being a citizen of the country to those people in the unincorporated states. They are second-class citizens. They are treated differently. So there's some resentment, and it can be a big deal. So in the 2013 and 2017 International Baseball Championship, so outside the Olympics, but just in baseball, Puerto Rico finished second both times. Once they lost to the United States, once they lost to, I think, Japan. But the next tournament will be here in a year. There was some time off because of COVID. They also, Puerto Rico's national basketball team beat the U.S. basketball team in the Olympics in 2004. So this gives opportunities. And what we'll see, particularly in Unit 2 and on, is these charged matchups that take place when a traditional power had some kind of control over a nascent state, and they play each other, and it gives that nominally or literally less powerful country or national team the chance to stand up and go toe-to-toe against it. So the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So they get that right because they are a unincorporated part of the United States. The Iroquois get the right because they're part of a cultural hearth. So this is an idea that provides special rights to the culture or region or people or sub-state that invented a sport. Lacrosse is invented by the Iroquois. So here's a map of where the Iroquois sit. You can see they're in that Great Lakes, Upper Great Lakes region. There's this grouping of tribes who invent the sport and who straddle now the borders between the United States and Canada. So the United States and Canada also play lacrosse, but so do the Iroquois. And the Iroquois have the right to participate as Canadian national team members, U.S. national team members, or Iroquois national team members. And I got to tell you how neat it is to see this flag display. So there's the Iroquois flag sitting right between the South Korean flag and the German flag. And so now you're saying, okay, who are we internationally? Like, we are something. South Korea and Germany are powerful states that are well respected in the global system. And there's the Iroquois flag right between them. There is another cultural hearth in the United States that I just said that is a part of the United States. It's fully incorporated. It's Hawaii, which is the birthplace of surfing. So in International Surfing Association competitions, the ISA is a sporting federation. It's in charge of surfing worldwide. They choose to recognize Hawaii, and the United States allows it because of the cultural hearth idea of Hawaii. Now, there is no other U.S. state that has the right to participate as a separate national team in any sport anywhere. And Hawaii only has the right in surfing because this is the only place it is a cultural hearth. So there is no Hawaiian judo team or Hawaiian table tennis team. I'd have to check and see if Hawaii can compete in sumo. That's one that I'd be interested to see because of the relationship with Japan and sumo. But I believe this is the only one. So here's a picture of Carissa Moore, who you're going to read about in an article that's assigned for this unit, because Team Hawaii is a very important identity factor for Hawaiians because they have a national team in surfing. And Carissa Moore is one of the best of the best. She's Hawaiian who chose to serve for the United States in the Olympics because the Olympics operates. So let me see if this makes sense to you. So the Olympics sits as a sporting organization to which other sporting federations send athletes. Okay. So the ISA with surfing and Hawaii, like the IAAF, which is track and field with the Northern Mariana Islands, they have the right to let them participate, right? That's their right as sporting federations. But the Olympics does not recognize those two states. So if you are a Hawaiian or a Northern Mariana Islander who wants to go to the Olympics, you have to do so as part of the United States, because there is no Hawaii, there is no Mariana Islands in the Olympics. So Carissa Moore and the other athletes had a choice to make. Do you stay loyal to the Hawaiian national team, or do you join the United States? And that's an interesting thing that you're going to read an article about. So what about the United Kingdom? What about England? What does it mean? So the United Kingdom is a collection of 4 nations. It's England, it's Scotland, it's Northern Ireland, and it's Wales. That's the United Kingdom. The official name of it is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And Great Britain is an island that has England, Wales, and Scotland on it. Where there's an England, so when people, that means that sometimes people say, you know, they refer to a country, they refer to England as if it's independent. It's not. It's part of the United Kingdom. There is an England sometimes in international relations or international gatherings, and it tends to be in one of 3 places. It tends to be in rugby, in soccer, or in cricket. Okay, these are cultural hearths where England invented the game. So they have a right to be England. So the chance for the English to express national pride comes through subnational pride, like to being English as opposed to being British or from the UK. It comes through sport. So here's a picture of Chloe Kelly celebrating with her teammates. There's the 2022 European Women's Soccer Championship, hosted in England this year, won by England this year in overtime when Chloe Kelly scored a goal and is celebrating here. She's a very important figure now in terms of English nationalism, not British nationalism, because she wasn't there to represent the rest of Great Britain. So now it's peculiar because in the Olympics there is a Great Britain. I'm going to talk more about that here in a minute. Let's switch to this slide. Okay, so this slide shows how in the United Kingdom you can go from 1 sports federation to 4 sports federations to 10. So in the Olympics is founded before the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is organized. Essentially what you're talking about is in the 1920s, early 1920s, Ireland breaks away and becomes independent. And then part of Ireland broke away from Ireland and joined the United Kingdom. That's where you get the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So you don't have a United Kingdom in the Olympics. You have Great Britain. And that means that FIFA, again, they recognize in soccer and rugby England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, but there is no way for the English to play soccer in the Olympics or rugby in the Olympics. Both of those are Olympic sports, but there is no England. There is no Scotland, there's no Wales, because Great Britain is the member there. So you can't go as a separate national team. So FIFA can recognize them, rugby can recognize them. Cricket's a little more confusing because there's actually 10 different parts of England that are considered distinct national teams. There's the Cook Islands, the Falkland Islands, the Isle of Man, the 3-legged symbol, Guernsey, Jersey, Turks and Caicos, Gibraltar, and St. Helena all have separate national teams in cricket. It's a part of the British Empire that was sort of settler groups went out and took cricket in these different places. It does mean that Guernsey, which is a little island in the English Channel, you see it here, and there's Jersey. Both of those have separate national teams. It means that Guernsey gets to go out and compete as an associate member of the International Cricket Council. And on those levels, they are there. I like their slogan of pushing the boundaries because they are pushing the boundaries of Guernsey itself, and of England, and of the United Kingdom, it's themselves outwards differently because of that relationship. So quickly, strategies, cultures of origin,